So if you have been following my Twitter feed every now and then, I've been posting about my work in this. I was able to get Raspberry Pis to run ESXi. I did pay $89 for the Raspberry Pi 4 with 8 gigabytes of RAM. You need more than 4 gigabytes to run. ESXi will actually not run with anything less. I'm using 2 micro SD cards, one for booting and one for ESXi. So there's one sitting in the SD slot and there's another one sitting on USB. And then you'll need, for setup, you'll need a keyboard, a USB drive, the micro HDMI to HDMI cable, and a monitor, of course. So the way that I set it up is I pretty much all detailed it out, but I got the files I needed from a PDF that is on this page. There they were. I took my first SD card and I deleted the partition that was there and created one partition, a FAT32. I moved the files over from the firmware master without any of the kernel image files. So here they are listed, but they are not here. Then I copied what was in the other zip file over. And there are going to be some overwrites, but that's OK. You just apply them all. Then I changed the config to say GPU memory only 16 because it's ESXi. I don't need fancy graphics. The USB drive, I put in the ISO file that's specifically for ARM. With any of the VMware ISOs, you're always going to get this error from Etcher saying, hey, it's not bootable. And you just hit continue. It's OK. That's all you need to get set up. Here's my first Pi. Got the USB here. Got, definitely attach your micro HDMI to this slot, not this one. This is the one that'll work. I got this heatsink off of Amazon for $17 if you are interested in it. When it booted, it gave me a little Raspberry Pi and I hit escape to get into the BIOS. And then within Device Manager, there is a setting that I showed right here. Device Manager, Raspberry Pi, Advanced Configurations. There's a set limit to 3 gig that you need to hit disabled. Then you'll come back to this main menu and you'll hit reset in order to restart and apply that setting. Interesting that it by default will limit the RAM to 3 gigs, even though it's an 8 gigabyte device. And yes, I totally use Legos as my case. After that, this part you could vary it. If you were doing this just on the Pi alone, I would suggest when you get to this point, when you're about to load the installer, to add this after the Run Weasel CD-ROM boot. This auto partition 8192. This will create a local data store. So it'll make the partition small when it installs so that you have the rest of the space to create one. I'm using an old machine as an NFS storage, so I didn't do that on my install. But definitely useful if you just have a Pi. And then from there, once you do this, the process of installing is just like installing ESXi. It's nothing any different. Just choose where you're going to install it. It's to the second SD card. It takes 5 minutes at most to install, and then it restarts, and then you're good. And then you can get to the site and log in. So ESXi on ARM. This is one of my 2 Pis. I have it connected to vCenter, which I'll show you in a bit. But it's running one VM. I just turned a VM on for show. So you can see with that VM running, I'm using 2.3 gigabytes of my memory. The storage is my NFS, so that doesn't really count. But yeah, it's definitely being monitored by vCenter. Here is vCenter. It's between my 2 Pis. I have 12 gigahertz total, and I'm only using 96 because my 2 VMs are currently idling. 4 gigabytes being used, but 11 free. And then my storage. Like I said, I got 2 powered on VMs, 2 hosts connected. So I have Ubuntu, and I have a second Ubuntu that has malware tools installed. Slowly building a little network. So if you went online and you just grabbed like an Ubuntu install, Ubuntu by AMD 64 will obviously not work because this is not a 64-bit. This is ARM. So you have to get the installers that are ARM based. Like I said, I am running a NFS store, data store. So this is here. The instructions for that are here actually. So I took a box that I bought in 2009, and I did some work to resurrect it. That's the machine. 2009. I only used this card to get stuff installed, and then I removed it. But it has PCI. That's how old it is. It has 2 USB 3.0 ports, and everything else is USB 2. I was surprised it didn't have a floppy connector. It has an IDE connector, no floppy. So this machine is not at all fully running. It was hilarious when I tried installing Ubuntu because that was happening with the graphics card. Yeah, I got Ubuntu server working, but Ubuntu desktop was not having it on that box. So anyway, I installed the OS. Hooray! I installed VMware Player. And the reason why I went with VMware Player over using something like VirtualBox, which is a little more native, is because of vCenter. And I'll explain that in a bit. But if you're curious, I took some SSDs that I had lying around, and I made a ZFS pool. And if you're interested in doing the same, I put the instructions here with what the instructions mean in parentheses. And then I added NFS, and I chose a folder within there to be what I'm sharing. And then I went to vCenter and I added that data store. So my 2 Pis are using my 2009 box as their storage. That's why on the Pis themselves, they don't have any local data store. It's just the one. For vCenter, if you are a Cabrillo student, you can actually get vCenter from this site. If you are a non-Cabrillo student, you can get vCenter for $200 a year from VMware Users Group. I used to use this, and you get everything. You pay the $200 a year, and you have the license to get vCenter in all its glory with everything else. So vCenter was a little annoying. I switched over to my Mac. I downloaded the ISO file that you get from either site for vCenter. In the ISO file, there is a folder called VSCA, and there is the OVA file. The thing about this is not your typical OVA file. When you import it, it actually gives you like a wizard. Obviously, I'm going with a tiny because I don't have that many hosts. Right now, I only have 2 hosts. It does take 2 virtual CPUs, and it takes 10 gigabytes of memory with a maximum space of 415 gigs. To me, it didn't matter because I have about a terabyte in my Z pool. So I'm like, whatever, sure. And then these are the only settings I set up. I told it it's going to be an IPv4 network, and you'll get its address via DHCP. When it did finish, I got the MAC address and I added it static into my DHCP server off of my pfSense box. This is my my 2009 box. One of the reasons why I'm running this on VMware is, if you notice down here, there's quite a lot of drives that were built as part of that process. I don't know why VMware did that, but VirtualBox does not like this. It complained, and I was like, all right, fine. So I just used VMware Workstation, which I knew was, it's native, so it'll work. Because it's running on an i5 2.8 gigahertz, yeah, it's old. This thing takes a good 10 minutes to start. I tend to just pause it and come back, because otherwise it is a slow booter. But once it's running, it actually runs smooth. This is the site of my vCenter, and it's working just fine. Oh, the web console. Here's my Ubuntu. Where's my username? I think it's that. No, it's working just fine. Communicating between my 2009 box and the Raspberry Pis, it's working beautifully. I don't have any performance issues as of yet. Now, I haven't made a cluster out of this yet, because you need 2 NICs. And, with the Raspberry Pi, you only have 1 NIC. So I actually ordered today a USB 3 to Ethernet. So I am hoping that when that gets here, I can add those to the Pis. The Pis recognize those cards, and then I can do things like vMotion and whatnot on the fly. Because I know that I can move these images these VMs from one Pi to another, because they're sharing the same data store. And I added the data store to both at the same time by right-clicking this, going to storage, set new data store, NFS, 4.1, obviously. And then I inputted my info there, and then I chose the 2 hosts here. No Kerberos, because it's local. And it was done. In just a few seconds, both Pis can access the same NFS store. So all my these 2 VMs are working off that same data store sitting on my 2009 box over the same network. It took a little bit of work. It definitely took time, but it was, once I knew what to do, it was straightforward. And I have already had to reinstall ESXi like 3 times on the Pis, because I tried the clusters, and that just that was fun. I did a number of things to screw them up, and then I was like, oh well, restart again. Which I'm now that I've gone through this process and I have it documented for you, I think now I can add this and I'm not going to add this now because the class is already well underway. But I would, if I teach this class next fall, I think I would make this part of the equipment that you have to buy for the course, so that you have your own data center and you can play with this. but it's definitely not as hard as I thought it would be. And I hope that by the time I teach this again, this will actually be easier. And it was a fun, 2 weeks or so to put this all together. And like I said, I'm still toying with it. So I'll keep updating uh, this blog of mine as I add more things to it, like the USB to Ethernet and get vMotion working. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to let me know. Feel free to ask in Discord. I have no problem demoing it and kind of showing it because it was actually kind of fun. Any questions? Okay. Then with that, I will stop the recording.